All right, it looks like we're live here on the Tennessee Holler. I'm Justin with the Holler. You can follow us at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. We're also at Memphis Holler and at Knoxville Holler now, which we're excited about. And we're tnholler.com if you want to subscribe or chip in. We survive on your support. Every dollar helps. It's why we were able to grow when a lot of other sites are trimming right now. So we really appreciate all the support and the involvement. Please keep the stories coming. Speaking of stories that were sent to us by readers, today we're talking to Bennie Smith, the Shelby County Election Commissioner, who I've been wanting to talk to for a really long time, who I'm hoping is going to give us the scoop on what's going on over there. Bennie, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So people know, Bennie, we're having a little trouble with the video, but we can hear them, and that's really what matters. So, Bennie, please start by bragging on yourself. I know you have a extensive resume. You are not just a county commissioner. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, so I'm a code writer. I've been writing code. I've been doing finance and analytics and database and political forecasting, economic forecasting, you name it. I've got the skin in the game when it comes to writing code and seeing what code can do and actually does in practice. So I've been doing that for the better part of 20 years. I got my own company where I do this for large and small companies, looking at their situations and finding out ways to automate some of their solutions. So I'm pretty good at it.
Pretty good at it. Well, you seem to be. I want people to know too, they can comment along as we talk. We can see your comments. And also you can subscribe to us on iTunes. The audio of this will be available there if you miss anything. So Bennie, let's start. I know your story doesn't start in 2015, but there was a Bloomberg piece on you where you discovered something that happened during the election in 2015 in Memphis. What was it that you found and how did you find it?
All right, so and I've definitely been doing a lot of work before 2014 and 2015. And what happened was, I have this prediction software that basically says who's going to vote and where they're going to turn up at. And every time I would do this for candidates, when they lose, everybody who loses says, the election was stolen. So 2014 was an anomaly year where a lot of people were saying, my election was stolen. And I didn't really believe them. I just lost, looking at the analytics and looking at the demographics of how the turnout was happening, it would lend support to think that they should have gotten elected, but you can't just let the numbers kind of dictate that should be the story. So as a consolation prize, I'm a software developer, I write code. I said, I will take a look at the systems that we use here, and as a consolation prize, tell you if I find anything, bad. So I was conducting a study in 2015 where I, looked at this software. I got it from blackboxvoting.org, and the court cases were, if you follow anything in Shelby County, we get sued on average once or twice a year, every election year. So that had happened for the better part of a decade. And I got that court document information and I studied it. And I saw that there was this two sets of books when it comes to tabulating the votes. And that is a very dangerous outlay for software to work that way. And I started studying how the totals could originate in one place and change once they hit the central tabulator. And so my prediction software told me that if you're going to experience anything problematic, it's going to happen in a very dense area. So I used the prediction algorithm to tell me which precincts to look at. And I went after the literal receipt. So before the votes hit the central tabulator, they are aggregated and produced in hard copy as a poll tape. So I literally there was this guy, Dale Gill, he was always shouting, go get the poll tapes, go get the poll tapes. And I was always in the background. So I came to the foreground, helping some of the candidates that were running, because we had an extensive slate of candidates that particular year. I think we even had Judge Joe Brown that was running for district attorney. And I just did what the guy said. I went and looked at the poll tapes, and I took a picture of the poll tape. And when I took a picture of the poll tape, it had 548, somewhere 548 votes. But when it hit the central tabulator, it was 330 votes. So it lost 40% of its value in like a 2-day span. And anybody who does basic addition know you can't get that way. You can only do that by subtraction. So that's when I submitted that to the election commissioners at the time. I think it was Norma Lester, and Wanda Halbert was one of the candidates who lost her election. She went to court and she sued, and she basically showed that one poll tape, and it took it from I guess the summary judgment. And that's when Bloomberg got interested, because they said nobody has ever had anything that you could actually show a problem, because everything is proprietary.
Okay, so I'm gonna time out here real quick.
Okay.
I know you know what you're talking about, but
Mhm.
for me, who has no real clue about the nuts and bolts of this stuff, you start talking about subtracting votes in two different books. It sounds intentional. Are you telling us that this was just a program gone haywire? I mean, there's really only two options, right? A program gone haywire or intentional vote subtraction and shenanigans. What was it?
So the software, I gotta be careful how I say it. The software is intentional. It is designed to allow that to happen. The design is allowing it to happen. This particular incident that I found was I guess a bug, is the best way to characterize it, where it was known to drop votes. And the state of Ohio knew about this bug over a decade ago, and they sued and they got replacement software. I think that's even chronicled in the Bloomberg article. But Shelby County is still using that software now. And we didn't get any replacement software, so we don't know how long this has happened. And I was just, foolish enough to take a picture and have some documented proof.
Okay, so I'm just giving my takeaway here. Correct me if I'm wrong. There is Buggy software that is either intentionally or unintentionally created to be buggy that comes from what company?
This is Diebold, the original software that most people got after half.
Diebold. Okay, so Diebold is making these touchscreen voting machines that are dropping votes, and these voting machines are being used in predominantly Black precincts.
Predominantly Black jurisdictions, or predominantly Black jurisdictions. I think the same software was in use in Georgia, and they experienced the same type of anomaly, where in large, dense areas, the memory cards just dropped.
So we know this happened. You proved it. You showed it to them. There was a lawsuit, and now we're still using the same machines. And not only that, but they just voted to get more of those machines.
Yeah, we doubled down, and I took a beating, but they basically ushered the next generation of that same type of software.
Same company?
I don't know if I wouldn't say the same company. We haven't disclosed who the vendor was, but I know that the software, no matter which company you get, the capability is in all of them, because there was like an antitrust lawsuit, and the original software kind of migrated into all of the other manufacturers.
Okay, and so now we've got buggy machines. We're doubling down on those that you've already proved are buggy, that drop votes. And then there's this whole story about a lobbyist for the touchscreen voting machines company shares a office with a lawyer for the election commission. Is that something you know a little bit more about?
Yeah, I read the story. I'd had to. We have a state election commissioner who I spoke with. We have this conference that we go to, and it's called Taki. Tennessee Association of County Election Officials. And I went to this conference, and it's basically where they drill into the commissioners that the election administrators are not their boss, but we are their boss. Let me say that. The election administrator is not my boss. My commission is the boss of my election administrator. And they kind of drill that in the Takio. And it was Commissioner Donna Barrett who uncovered a bunch of basic gap violations from this association that we attended. And I was talking to her because I do political consulting. And she said to me, she said, when it comes to your political consulting, you want to avoid the mere fact that it could look like there's some impropriety. So when I took the election commissioner job, I had to stop helping candidates win, because if there was something wrong with the election, I would be a named person on the lawsuit. So I brought that up to look at our attorney through the same lens. The mere fact that looks that way is where I would say that the mere fact that it looks like there's some impropriety is enough for that to be problematic. So the story came out literally days before we were ready to vote, and I asked the lawyer on the record, I take him at his word for it. He said, there's nothing there. But, if I was to play devil's advocate, I would say, well, I'll never see you out in public with the guy because y'all go home at night together. Like, if you're in the same office with somebody, it's really hard, for somebody to say that you could or couldn't do anything because y'all under the same roof. So the impropriety, the appearance of the impropriety was pretty shameful to me.
And then there's the story of election administrator Linda Phillips, whose sons worked for the company that provides the voter registration software. Is that another thing that just came out? Is that something else that we need to be concerned about? I mean, what I'm getting at here is there seems to be a buildup of things to worry about swirling around the Shelby Election Commission and voting in Memphis.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you can comment on specifically the Linda Phillips story, but the main question is, I guess what I'm wondering from you, Benny, is how worried should people in Tennessee and frankly the country be about elections in Memphis?
Yeah, that one is just rude. I don't know how true it is. It seems to be pretty factual because I asked her on the record, and one of my initial questions, she was like, I never worked for an election company, and she was talking about this company Knowing, which is under considerable fire when you just look further to say, what about Everyone Counts? Because that was the one that was in the research that was published, and I think that was Audit USA, John Brakey. I'm a friend of John Brakey, so shout out to John Brakey. They were the people that were putting eyes on this and looking at it. So I believe it was Susan Binchon of Audit USA that found that research. But then I asked the election administrator, and she was like, well, yeah, but I disclosed it. And she started talking about some documents that she gave to the county. But back to Takio, the election commissioners is where that information should be disclosed to. And former Commissioner Norma Lester, who was on the commission before I got on the commission, she said that ain't happened. So the body, the oversight body, had no idea about that. So, it's being said that she steered $1 million to her son and then went back to the well for another $175,000 to say, we want to buy these ads that only one vendor can provide the solution for, which is essentially a no bid contract at that point. And I don't think the election commissioners knew about that ask either. And I want to say I was on the commission at that time, so I know I didn't know about it. Well, and the second part, the second part, should people be concerned about Memphis. The best way I can say it is there are two keys that don't belong together: public and proprietary. Those two words should not be in the same sentence often at all. And what you have is public dollars, public processes. The process of casting a vote is a secret process, but the process of counting it is a public process. The process of funding it, that's all public. And what I see is we're funding with public dollars and we're buying proprietary information, which is private. So whenever the public wants access with the money that they spent, they are going to be denied that access. So all of this proprietary ushering in of software and non-public means of conducting public business is problematic in itself.
Right. So what's the general overall takeaway? And then I also want to know what you think we should be doing. So first, let me ask you this. If somebody were to say to you, how concerned should we be about Memphis, 1 to 10, about elections in Memphis and whether they're safe and secure and being counted the right way? 1 to 10, how do you feel about
42? Can I go to 42?
42. All right. Well, there you go. Well, I hope people are listening to that. Bennie, I can tell you're somebody that we need to listen to. And, I hope people are listening to what you're saying here and people will look into this further. There's somebody on Twitter named Jennifer Cohn who really pays attention to this stuff. And she has been highlighting what's going on at Jennifer Cohn 1. I think she is on Twitter. Go look at some of the threads. They're very alarming. She talks about these machines. It's not just Memphis. These touchscreen machines are a problem throughout the country. And there is a whole wormhole you can go down to see all the conflicts of interest, all the ugliness that has gone on, especially in Georgia, where you mentioned it happened when Stacey Abrams lost. So there's a lot going on here and a lot that we need to pay attention to. Bennie, what should we be doing? What's the right way to vote?
The right way to vote is actually pretty simple. Anything that is repeatable lends itself to automation. I know it. I write it all day long. Casting a ballot is a repeatable thing. We do it over and over again. And when you have a computer casting your ballot, it's creating a first generation copy because it is printing it. There is nothing to stop it from printing it again. And the new print that it would make would be a first generation copy also. So you could reprint an election if you were a bad actor, or you can disrupt it if you were a bad actor. If you can show a person 14 names when they show 16 names, nobody's going to know when they leave that screen that happened. So the best process is a hand-marked paper ballot, because you'll see what all the choices were, and you'll also see what you chose. The complete picture is there when you do that. And that can be sent over to the counting process, which you can then automate, because the main thing is preserving the record. The voter's intent, like, I know my intent because I filled it out. There ain't nothing to tell me that I ain't intend to do that, because my brain and my motor functions kind of work in conjunction with each other to fill in the circle. However, when you put a machine in front of me, then you got to interpret the intent through the lens of code and modules, and programmers, they copy code off the internet, man. I'd be surprised. If I could look at some of that code, I'd probably cringe at some of it. So that part of computation doesn't belong when you can just replace the $5,000 machine that's probably considered considerably inferior to an iPad 1. You could replace that with an 8-cent pencil and get more intent from the voter. So hand-marked paper ballot, fill it in, show me everything, put it in a digital scanner. That's going to create a selfie of that hand-marked paper ballot. Release those images online so people can police their republic themselves. And now we have the hand-marked paper ballot as a backup. So if somebody's trying to play with or fiddle around with the images, the other thing I would say, nobody commits data in the election process, right? Nobody actually commits the data. We don't see what the results are until 2 or 3 days later. Commit them on election night, commit them right to the record, and then we should do a system of accounting, which is audits, to get back to why things were or weren't what they said. So in the case of Shelby County, where it was an error that missed 40% of a precinct, we would know every time that that happened. The citizens will likely catch it. And then transparency of that process will walk us back to what actually happened. And then nobody's going to be upset that we say, hey, the memory card didn't count it. Thank God we got the ballot so we can add it up. And now we can go back after the vendor and say, look, you need to do a software update so that you can give us, we get Windows updates all day long because the users say what happened. We use Zoom. Zoom had a problem and they corrected it because the users found it. So that's the way it should work with everything, but it doesn't work that way with voting.
Well, that makes too much sense for it to be the way we do it.
Yeah.
We constantly hear about how don't worry about these machines because they're not hooked up to the internet, so they're not vulnerable to hacking. Is that true?
Right. No. That's, you see, I got an array of screens here. I'm a technologist. I take it seriously. I got security cameras. I got everything. Even my security cameras, I got them as closed circuit, but they connect to the internet at some point. Every piece of computer has to get some type of firmware update or some type of hardware update down to the coffee maker. And those things run kernels, and each one of those things can be interrupted by some bad actor. If you consider that when you look at it from a voting perspective, the machine may not be connected to the internet, but it has the capacity to connect to the internet. And the things that are programmed come from some computer that at one point got an update, which was download. So if I get into the firmware from a download and then into the USB drive and then copy it over to the machine, it's pretty still this the internet still. So that's just a notion that they should just stop saying that because any amount of hardware, I'm talking to you on a DSLR camera. I got to download the firmware updates. I hook it up to my computer. I download the firmware updates, and then it doesn't connect to the internet anymore. But at some point, there was an interface to the internet.
So if it connects to the internet, and if that's true, then are our elections being hacked and messed with?
Absolutely. I think there was the John Oliver from HBO. He had this collage of people saying it's not connected to the internet. It's not connected to the internet. And then he asked this guy in Texas, so are your machines connected to the internet? He's like, no, absolutely not. And he said, well, wait a minute. We use an old-fashioned phone line, and the first thing that went off in my head was. That's dial-up. That's the internet. That's the internet. And Shelby County does the same thing here. We go through these landlines and these private networks, and those are how you reach out to the internet. So it is just a foolish notion to keep saying it that way. Like, most people aren't informed about the internet, but it's.
Man, so that's all pretty depressing, because at the end of the day, Benny, like there's so many people doing so much work to, fight for their candidates and not lobby, but push issues and organizations. And there's so much at stake. And to think that, these things are not that secure. And, I've been to some election commissions where the people that handle these things, to use a Southern phrase, bless their hearts, but like they wouldn't know code from, a banana, and these are the people who are dealing with these machines on a daily basis. They put them in a room somewhere, who knows what goes on with them. So it's really frustrating and scary to hear from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, that things are maybe not as solid as we would like them to be. My last question, and then I'll let you go. And I really appreciate you talking to us about this. And I hope you'll keep in touch and let us know when you need us to talk about something, or, come back and tell us when things are going on. But I believe that if we can bank online and we can do all these other things online, we can have our credit cards online, that eventually we should be able to get to a place where we can vote online. And I think if we were able to do that in a secure way, which, by the way, we're learning that the non-online way is not that secure. So maybe it would actually be more secure in a way if we just commit to it. I think if we did that, it would change the country overnight. I think young people would vote in droves, and suddenly our country would move forward in a way that nothing else we're talking about would do. I think online mobile voting is the future, and it would change this country overnight. Do you see that happening ever?
No, I actually cringe at the notion. I'm a tech guy and I carry a BlackBerry for very valid reasons. Now, you said a lot that I got to unpack, but the first part of what you were saying about getting the information, I think anytime you want to talk, we can go hours on end, whatever. If people want to listen, it's time for some people like you and me to start speaking up and kind of explaining this stuff. I really applaud that you trying to dig into some of the wormhole. A lot of us have been there. Um, the part about voting online, you know, the internet is, man, we only see like 1% of the internet. if you get if you don't know about a Tor browser and some of this other stuff about the dark web, there are just too many avenues of an unregulated space that people have no concept of how it works and links together. There is always going to be some guy that's going to find out if I didn't have enough coffee when I was writing my code, or if that guy didn't have enough coffee when he was writing his code, somebody's going to find a leak or a way in. There's just going to be too much that you have to protect in order for voting to happen like that. Banks get hacked. I worked for a company, man, they looted the life savings of people, and they got in through like a warehouse, like the most unsuspecting computer that scaled through the whole company. And the company I worked shut down for weeks. People was like looting their Vanguard savings accounts. So it's not something that I think requires that much risk. I think the hand marked paper ballot and counted in public, if we had citizen input, then we could do this in the analog way, not the digital way. Digital is just Bitcoin. Everybody was talking about Bitcoin, and then somebody found out a way to fake the signature. AES encryption. Then somebody found out a way to do that. Then all the keys get leaked. Amazon gets hacked. Yahoo gets hacked. Universal gets hacked. Sony gets hacked.
Let me push back on you a little bit though, because I mean,
Okay.
you're really telling me that what we're doing is getting hacked also. So, and you mentioned Bitcoin, and I'm not claiming to be a Bitcoin expert, but Bitcoin's doing pretty well. Bitcoin's doing pretty well right now. And the underlying technology of Bitcoin is a thing called the blockchain. And I'm not going to go too far into it because I wouldn't be able to. General idea for folks that are listening is the blockchain is basically like kind of like a Google Doc that everybody shares and nobody controls, and you can't really, no one person owns it, but it keeps track of everything. That to me, that kind of thing where it's like really open, everybody can see it. I know that this is down the wormhole, but I guess what I would say, Benny, is it sounds like there's no perfect answer here other than traditional straight up hand marked paper ballots, which I'm for that too, by the way.
Yeah, this particular process, because the jurisdictions are small, the hand marked paper ballot approach is solid. If I had it my way, hand marked paper ballots counted on closed circuit camera in public, right? Put it in a glass box. I don't think that part should be a secret as it is. Again, I give you the proprietary versus public argument there. You can count an election, and it shouldn't. I think we want it to instant. I mean, I got to wait 30 days to get a mortgage, but you can transfer a whole state, and they want it in 30 minutes, right? You look at all the power that changes hands when you can appoint and give somebody $1 million salary or a $20 million contract, or in this case, they think that the administrator is giving her son $1 million contract, right? There's a lot of authority and power in that type of transition. I would say that Canada tried the online voting, and I think I can say this. I work with the RCMP in Canada, and I think the equivalent to our NPR, and they found all kinds of spoofed IP addresses, and it was a lot of stuff that happened with their internet voting. So I definitely think we're a long way away from that. I think more of an analog approach and more citizen involvement is probably the way. But I mean, we can hash it up, and maybe we can do a few more of these where we can take questions and chop it up, man.
I would love that. As a last thing, because it's a big issue right now and it's more
Okay.
along the analog line, what do you think about universal vote by mail for everybody? Is that what we should be doing right now in a pandemic?
So I get heartburn with vote by mail because the signature verification part is still done with computers. However, I do think vote by mail is the way for right now, as long as the record that is being authenticated was filled out by a person. So we can always go back, like you can go back and look at a chess match from 1919 because they recorded the movements. You can, the Army still use the old-fashioned logbook. It's just paper, right? I would just end it with this way. When I was looking for the documents for the to vote on the our voting machine selection, our administrator, I really feel like she obstructed the process. But she, went, they stayed weeks on figuring out how they could not give me the information that I got. Shout out to the CAO, Dwan Gillen. I called him. He humbled himself and got it to me in 24 hours, right? The process that all the information that they were saying took weeks, and they were saying that the purchasing department said that I shouldn't have it. The guy who's over purchasing got it to me in 24 hours. But the reason why I brought that up is because when I did get the information, it was like 700 pages of paper. And I asked the administrator on the record, I said, why did you not give it to me in soft copy? And she said, well, purchasing said, get this, for security reasons, we should print it out on paper to avoid it being easy to copy or manipulate, or for you to change something about it. So her protective measure to keep me from seeing information was to reduce me to paper. So if that method of her trying not to allow me to see cost information, right, on the advice of counsel and everything, said, look, put it in paper, it'll be really hard for somebody to do something with. That's exactly the same case that I'm making about the voting process. Put it in paper, it makes it really hard for somebody to do something with.
Well, I think that makes too much sense. As a last thing, we're in the bottom in voter turnout. It seems like from where I'm sitting, that's intentional. How do you feel about the job someone like Trey Hargett's doing? Is he taking steps to move us out of the basement when it comes to voter turnout? Or does it feel like as an election commissioner that, we're sort of trying to make it harder for people to turn out?
I can only speak from the interfaces that I've had with Trey Hargett. I'm pretty bummed out about Trey Hargett. I've been asking for basic information that is by right mind, by statutory authority, audit laws and document procedures, how we follow processes here. And for the better part of a year, I've been on the commission for a year, and I today have not received really any information. And I even went so far as to go to the state coordinator. That's I forget his name now, but I asked our state coordinator, and I know that some of the legislatures even appealed to Trey Hargett, and I haven't gotten any support from our Secretary of State with basic information down here. So I wouldn't go so far as to say it's deliberate, but I don't think it's important for sure, at least from the lens that I see as a commissioner, because I don't really get any support when I ask.
What were you trying to get from him?
Basically, like how do we count hand-marked paper ballots? What do we do with signatures? How do we tabulate votes? Who's supposed to go where, and how do we check the seals? And if the seals don't match, what do we do? There are absolutely, I was just going to record, there are no processes of how we actually do that. And I think that's a problem with government, because you get these people, like you said, bless their hearts. That's my setup here. My commissioners, they don't do this stuff for a living, and they're asked to vote. We try to have 2 or 3 different online meetings, and we couldn't even pull it off. We couldn't even do it. And yet we voted on, $5 million worth of equipment that it's already outdated, it's not supported, and I could talk for hours about that. So we're in trouble. Last point I would make is we are headed to something that is completely destabilizing in the region. And I would say this because I've even been called on. I had an invite to meet with the Trump campaign when they were running in 2016. I didn't do it because I wasn't ready. But I've had the opportunity to talk to Republicans about this issue as well as Democrats, and we're careening to where whoever loses in 2020, it's going to be a fallout. And because we're not adopting hand-marked paper ballots, the president, if he wins, the strategist in me says he's got a really good chance. If he wins, all of the detractors are going to want to demand proof that he actually won. And if he loses, all of his supporters are going to want to demand evidence that he lost. And we won't have it. We will not have it. If we had paper, we would actually have it, but we won't. We will not have it. So I am not looking forward to November for sure.
Man, all right, Benny. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Please stay in touch and definitely keep us posted if there's anything we need to holler about. All right. I appreciate what you're doing. And I'm just glad we have you in there to let people know what's really going on.
All right. Whenever you want to do it again, we'll do it again.
Sounds good, Benny. Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay.